I only ended up playing 2 games in September, Borderlands 4 and Hellclock. This is because I ended up being busy with the games that I was playing, as opposed to getting to try new stuff. And I have some thoughts, especially about Borderlands 4. Before I get into thoughts about the game itself, though, it's time to beat that dead horse called Borderlands 4 performance problems, because it was really hard for me to get into or enjoy the game, in large part because, despite having the recommended hardware, I could not get the game to run at a stable 60 FPS on medium settings. The issues were not consistent. I managed to get footage where everything looked fine. There were also times where I had to re-record stuff because I was running at like single-digit frames or the game just straight up crashed. In fact, when I made a build video, the game straight up crashed while I was talking about aspects of a build and going over my items. So yeah, not particularly enjoyable. But what about Borderlands 4 itself? Well, first up, it has a really bad case of Ubisoft open world syndrome, which is to say that almost all of the interesting developments in the story take place at the very start and at the very end. In the middle, you are turned loose in a giant open world, much like you are in Assassin's Creed Mirage, for example. Because you are turned loose in this giant open world, and you can do things in any order, nothing that has narrative weight or impact can influence anything else. Which I really hate, because it means I feel like I am just going around doing things to check off map markers, rather than to engage with a world that's actually reacting to the things that I'm doing. Well, I think there is value from a gameplay perspective in open world games, and I have certainly enjoyed open world structures in some titles, such as Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I find that they do hurt the game's ability to tell a good story. You either need to keep everything anecdotal and minute to minute, which Borderlands 4 does through its side quests, some of which were actually quite enjoyable, or you need to stick to a grand overarching narrative, but make it clear that there is a golden path to follow, that if you deviate too much from that, you'll not be able to make progress. And I certainly think that's one aspect that Borderlands 4 could have done better. But there's another problem with Borderlands 4, which is that while they're trying to emulate Borderlands 2, and while yes, they did add a lot of quality of life improvements, the gunplay feels very snappy, the grappling hook's good, just moving around the world actually feels very solid when you get a stable frame rate. I feel like I'd played Borderlands 4 before. In fact, I feel like I had played it back when I played Borderlands 2. Kind of reminds me of some of the conclusions that Skillup came to when he reviewed Far Cry 6. In trying to make another popular Borderlands game, Gearbox followed the formula way too closely, and it resulted in an experience that does not feel in any way novel or interesting. These days, more games are coming out than I can even find time to play, as seen by the fact that in September, several games came out that I didn't get to play until October. Those being the 1.0 for Hades 2 and also Megabonk. There are also games that came out in September, or even earlier, like the Rogue Prince of Persia and Hollow Knight Silksong, that have gone on my backlog. Because yeah, there's a whole bunch of video games around, and a lot of them are really good. So when faced with so many good options, why would I spend my time on something that is thoroughly mediocre? In short, I don't think I'm going to be playing Borderlands 5. And I'm also probably not going to be playing as many sequels for major franchises, especially when the original creatives involved in the title have moved on to other things. Kind of thinking of BioShock here, where I'm much more interested in Ken Levine's upcoming game Judas than I am in the next BioShock game, which is made by completely different people, and is likely to pay more attention to recreating the popularity of previous BioShock games than actually providing an interesting experience. Now, the other title I played in September, and one that I played for well over 100 hours in September, is the complete opposite, that being Hellclock, a small indie roguelike / ARPG developed by Rogue Snail. I ended up playing it because the Clockmaker's Tool update, which brings crafting to the game along with a full difficulty rebalance, came out at the very end of September. Previously, when I played the preview build and when I played 1.0, I gave quite a bit of feedback to the developers, especially on the Ascension mode. They liked this feedback so much that they wanted my thoughts on 1.1 as well, something that I was happy to do. I love indie games, and anything I can do, provided I have the time to contribute to making the indie games I enjoy a little better, I am happy to do. So I spent a lot of time testing out a PTR and going over things. If you don't know what Hellclock is, check out my review down in the description below. It's from 1.0, so it doesn't have the crafting stuff, but I'll also link to a crafting guide so you can learn more about how that works. TLDR, PoE style crafting. If you know PoE crafting, you're probably going to be fine in Hellclock. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes for what I was doing on the PTR, where every couple days, there would be a major balance change. So first, it was just the campaign. So I played through the campaign, and I gave my thoughts. Where did I struggle? Was this boss too hard? Was that boss too easy? That kind of stuff. Mostly focusing on the things that were too difficult or stood out to me as problematic, such as when a build is very, very OP or very underpowered. Then, Mark, the lead developer, would take some time, he'd rebalance stuff, or he'd do a balance pass on a different difficulty. I'd take my character and I'd progress from the campaign into Abyss. Did this feel good? Well, maybe I got stuck for a bit farming in Act 1. Maybe I got stuck on the matron because for a while she was giving absurd amounts of curse stacks. Then I'd get past that, I'd clear it, and I'd give my thoughts. But there was a point where it hit me that yes, all the feedback from myself, the other people on the community council, and all the changes that Mark had been making really did come together was when I started a new file. After Abyss and Oblivion had already been balanced, after there had been a ton of changes, some underpowered builds had been buffed, quite a few bugs were fixed, items that apparently never quite worked were now working much better. All that stuff, I did another fresh save. I played through all the way from the start through Oblivion, and it felt really good. In fact, it felt better than progression in Hellclock has ever felt to me. And so yes, game development is an iterative process. When one thing is changed, it doesn't necessarily lead to an impact you can feel immediately. It might in the case of a boss giving too much curse. That boss no longer gives too much curse. But it might not. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, when all of those changes add up, the end result is a game that feels much better to play. So, as far as I'm concerned, Hellclock is in the best state that it's ever been. There's a lot of viable builds, and yes, there are even a couple of overpowered ones, specifically Powder Bag with minions, because as it turns out, that archetype had a lot of bugs, those bugs got fixed, and that added a ton of power to the build, which is another thing that's very important to consider when it comes to game design. In fact, I saw another example of this in the recent discussion between Chris Wilson and Grim Dawn's Arthur Bruno. Where there are times they'd get feedback, they'd go, okay, we need to improve this, or we'd need to nerf this, and then find out, oh yeah, that's because this core thing just never worked properly to begin with, and it was giving people a skewed perspective on the skill. So if you fix those bugs, something that seemed too weak is now too strong. And sometimes vice versa. If there's a bug that was causing something to do a lot of damage and you fix it, all of a sudden a skill that you thought was a top performer is in fact underperforming and needs some buffs. Which is also why in patch 1.2, I do suspect there's going to be a few more balance changes when it comes to Hellclock. For now though, game still feels great, and because it's a single player experience, you don't really have to worry about someone else playing an OP build ruining your experience. If you do not want the game to be easy to that extent, just play any build except the OP Powder Bag minions, because the game certainly isn't balanced around Powder Bag minions. Oh, and by the way, as a thank you for helping out with the testing, the developers have allowed myself and a couple other people on the community council to design their own unique items. So look forward to that in Hellclock patch 1.2. All in all, it's been an absolute joy to work with Rogue Snail, and I even used the time to put together some guides that have gone live over on Maxwell GG. I'll link that down below if you want to check it out. For now, looking to the month ahead, I plan to play some Mega Bonk, talk about it in the near future. I'm also playing through Hades 2. I started a fresh file, and I'm sure I'm going to have some thoughts after I finish the story. Plus, I believe October has Steam Next, so I'm probably going to do another Steam Next wrap-up like I've done for the last couple. I really like the formula of just picking a bunch of games, playing through them, and giving some quick impressions. I don't think I'll be doing fully polished videos. In fact, I might even do something even more casual than I have, and instead of doing a playthrough a bit plus analytical portion, I might just play through and analyze it as I play. Let me know down below if you have any thoughts in regards to that. And so thank you very much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed, do be sure to get subscribed, and with that, I'll see you in the next one.